Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, here in London, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead, over in the States. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
We're thrilled. We seem to have had some really exciting guests on with us recently, and we can say exactly the same about today. We're thrilled to have Alex Farmer with us today, joining us to talk about customer success, organization structures, and what that looks like in the bigger context or in terms of the organizational strategy. Alex, I'm sure most of you guys will know him. He's a customer success executive with experience building post-sales teams, really to help drive growth, decrease churn in some really incredible high growth, really fast moving B2B SaaS scale ups. He's also the founder and CEO for Customer Success Excellence, the world's first awards event that's dedicated to customer success. And he's going to give us a little talk about that later on. And we've got the first event planned for this later this year, I believe, Alex, which is really cool. So really excited about that. Alex, you're currently the VP of Customer Success at Cognite. Cognite are an AI software service company, really supporting digital transformation of, I think the phrase is heavy industry assets all around the world. And really what you've done there, you've come in from day one, built the team up, and are really helping drive what that kind of that data looks like and what it means for big industrial organizations. So some really incredible things there to help turn around challenging customers, build around some really great value from Alex. Welcome. We are super excited to have you here. And I've known you for a good number of years, Alex. We met, I think, a couple of years back, 4 years back, kind of one of the customer success leadership dinners in Spain, and kind of stayed in touch. So I love the journey you've gone on. We were just saying you've been in the UK now for 10 years, which is ridiculous.
If we're rounding, yes, indeed. Jason, I remember when we met, you had the unfortunate dishonor of sitting next to me at that dinner. So I accosted your ears for several hours. So thank you for putting up with me. And it's all come full circle here, accosting your ears once again. Pleasure to be a guest on the podcast.
Would you just go and introduce yourself for some of our listeners that perhaps don't know you? And I don't think there are many of them, but just give a bit more info to kind of your background and your journey. How have you got to where you've got to?
Yeah. I guess I'll go chronologically, not with my year of birth, but I guess the start of my career. I actually grew up, I will go back to my year of birth. I was born in the Silicon Valley. So I grew up in the California Bay Area and I spent about 18 years there. And then I went out to college in Boston. And from there, got my first job as an implementation consultant at an HR tech scale up. I had no idea if I wanted to be in HR or in business. So I thought I should join an HR business. And also helpfully, they gave me an offer, I think November. And I was graduating in May. So taking the pressure off for a good 6 months. Don't quote my math there. I think that is accurate. Yeah, 6 months was also a privilege. So I did that and moved out to the UK, transferred out there with that company. And that's where I found FairSale, where I had the privilege of being employee 32. FairSale, for those that don't know, is a kind of a UK scale-up success story, not my words, but a privilege to be a part of. I was employee 32 and I joined on our support team for 6 months and then became our first CSM in January. I think January 1st, 2015 is the transfer date that I moved into customer success, which correlation, certainly not causation, is when some will say customer success came to Europe, let's say in full force. So it was a right correlation, I promise, but it was a great place, right place at the right time. And I spent 4.5 years there. They were a Salesforce ISV that provided HR tech solutions on the Salesforce platform. 4.5 years there building the customer success team. The company was exited in March 2017 to Sage. We were Sage's first cloud acquisition. So from a small scale up, I joined when we were £1.5 million in ARR. And when I left, we were about 16 million pounds in ARR. So your full 0 to 20 story. But then through that, we were Sage's first cloud acquisition. And of course, they were 13,000 people in many different countries. An interesting journey. And in some ways, being in customer success for a cloud aspiration company, as opposed to a cloud company, is a very interesting time. Let's put it like that. And then from there, I moved on to a Series A scale up in the legal tech space, where I led the full post-sale function, success, onboarding, support, training, partnerships, and then also European sales for about 3 to 4 months. I think traded depth for a hell of a lot of breadth, let's say. And then I found my home at Cognite. Heavy asset industries is what we call it. Oil and gas, manufacturing, renewables, and power and utilities. The platform that we provide creates context for disparate data silos. But for industrial companies, that becomes even more important because you have not just IT data, but you have operational data, the live operating status of every single valve on an oil rig per se. So super interesting space and some big challenges to solve that are super relevant at the moment. It's an exciting journey. We became Norway's first unicorn in July putting them on the unicorn map, so to say. And I guess it's lucky number 3 in terms of building a post-sale function.
That's it, Alex. I love that journey. And I think you've come through actually starting in implementation, then in support. You've seen all of these kind of post-sales, customer-facing roles. And I think it really brings us on nice to talk about this. You've worked with some incredible companies that you've come into. You've gone through that acquisition. You're now in a unicorn company as well. So you've seen that growth. What are some of the kind of go-to strategies and approaches that you've got as to how you build the customer-facing organization? What are some of the big takeaways?
Yeah, one day I'll come into a place where it exists, or let's say, and when I say exists, the customer success function, right? The CSM column in the org chart. It's been interesting because each company is different domain. In some ways, they were different contract values, right? So mid-market for Fair Sale and Inco Pro, and then Cognite, super high enterprise, very high touch. So that's been interesting as well. But I think there are some common threads really coming in and not just going out and listening to customers. There's the obvious customer tour that you do to understand their challenges and understand the outside in view. But I think more importantly, and maybe what gets underestimated for first-time CS leaders, is the need to do the internal tour around other functions and departments. I sometimes describe customer success as, I haven't coined this phrase. Somebody said customer success is easy. No, it's simple. It's just not easy. And that resonates, but principally because, and what I sometimes describe customer success as is we just took 20% of the most customer-centric things that other teams in the org chart used to do and combined them into one role. And I think there's an element of that where, what I mean to say is there's a lot of change management that happens where the support case review that the support team used to do, you might be doing it in EBR now, right? So you carve off the top, let's say most customer-facing 20%. So the customers have to navigate 5 different bits of 20%, if that makes sense. And rather just has one person that they can go to that facilitates their journey to value with your company. So I think one of the biggest challenges or opportunities lessons that I've learned is the need to really change manage internally, that we're not here to steal someone's power, clout, or credibility. If we start by saying customer success is an organizational philosophy and an organizational kind of mandate, we're going to partner together to make that a reality and really finding common ground. So when it's with sales, driving references, making it so the experience sells itself, right? Removing friction for them to close deals, as an example. If it's implementation, if it's support, finding common ground for them as well. So there's fewer support escalations and we get on top of things faster. I think that's maybe one of the most principal lessons that I've taken in and also made mistakes on. And that's how you learn throughout that journey that I described earlier.
That's awesome. And I love hearing about the internal change management because that's one that keeps coming up everywhere we go and with a lot of clients that I work with. Along that thread, I'd love to know what sort of things you found have been most beneficial, made the other teams most want to collaborate with you as you're trying to change things internally, and what have been the things that seem to put up walls for folks that you're like, I would advise people to avoid that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are hard about customer success, but one of the easier things is all you're doing is sharing the voice of the customer. So when you really boil it down to brass tacks, if you disagree with me, that's fine. But if we really confront each other and it all comes to a head, you're the one who's advocating against what, should be the opinion of our customer. And nobody wants to be not customer centric. So I think there's the power of that message and let's say the bully pulpit, so to speak, that you carry as a CS leader or a CSM should not be underestimated. I think the first thing that I try to focus on as we're setting up kind of the systems, the processes of customer success is just injecting customer data into the business. Because with that information, I don't have to confront, I can influence. If I provide customer data as a service, I'm not in marketing, so CDAS is a terrible acronym, but let's not go with that. But customer data as a service for the business to make decisions. So examples, a common Slack channel where you can send customer news into one channel so everybody can understand what's happening, the highlights with your customers. When customer health changes and you can send to a central Slack channel that everybody is required to be a member of, by the way, why their health changed and the reason for red or yellow. And then also one of the things that we do when we run a QBR, we'll summarize the qualitative feedback from our customers and then send that to our executive team. And then I guess the last example is customer survey results, NPS scores, NPS qualitative feedback. We'll send it to Slack channels as well. But the most important thing is, as much as I would like to be in I'm going to revise that statement before I even say it. I would not like to be in every single meeting that happens at a company. That would be insane. But the customer's voice should be, right? So doing what you can to, there's a couple of examples where I remember sitting in a meeting and it was our engineering leader or our marketing leader that said, but customer X in this QBR that happened 3 weeks ago said this, therefore we need to do that. And just giving them the power to ensure that decisions being made all the time are predisposed to serve customers ultimately makes our life a hell of a lot easier as CS leaders, because we're not fighting fires. Then we can, of course, transition from that reactive motion, which is where unfortunately most CS teams starting up find themselves, into that proactive motion more quickly, which is critical.
How do you go about? I mean, it's fascinating that because I've talked about this before, and being that you're often the sole representative representing the voice of the customer, and sometimes it can be lonely, challenging because people do disagree with you. But what are some of the ways, kind of tools and methods you've used to get other people, other stakeholders, other leaders in the business to understand what it actually means, what the impact is of what the customer is saying? How do you get them to take it the right way and to make it so that we can take actions based on it?
Yeah, it's always challenging. And I'll weave that. I'll say other, Jason, I didn't fully answer your question, I think earlier as well, around what some of the challenges were in driving this collaboration. So maybe I can answer both. I think it's great. We get the voice of the customer. We surround decision makers with the customer voice that can influence, but it doesn't make them make decisions that are kind of in the customer's interest, which I think is the crux of both of your questions. I think where I've seen the most challenge is around, let's say, KPI divisions, right? The classic, who owns renewal, who owns upsell, and what does that actually mean for not just my involvement, but also my commission. And I don't oppose that. Everybody in the go-to-market org is usually paid with some variable. So that's not a dig at sales, it's a dig at collaboration. And how do we lower and I've made this mistake coming into an organization, trying to kind of, there is no CS, so let's be the CS heroes and really be a bit of a bull in a china shop. And it really backfired for us. And there was constant infighting. The words as the voice of the customer were taken with a grain of salt, because it was always pushing the agenda that CS should own more than they do. And it was really at the detriment. That's a lesson I certainly learned, and we got over it. I think I now, when navigating that, use a little bit more tact in trying to compromise and make sure people are mutually incentivized, and also be a little bit more, I've never really worked in an enterprise, and maybe this is why, a little bit less, I won't use the word impulsive, but I've just used it so you can imply what you like from that, but a little bit less, execute with a little bit less pace and a little bit more consideration, and be a little bit more nimble about how you're trying to influence and not just shove change down people's throats. So I think that was one of the downsides or challenges in really making those collaborations work, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm curious, since you've worked in a lot of different organizations and gone through phenomenal growth and acquired and all that good stuff too. Do you think in general, more leaders are understanding what CS is and the role it's supposed to play, or is it still a big black box for a lot of folks? Because a lot of the organizations I encounter, some of the newer ones, they're starting earlier, but I'm not sure they get it more. And some of the older, more established organizations, there's still a big question of, what is this CS stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a perfect short answer to that one, because it's so complex. My immediate thought is one of irony. Cognite, as an organization, we work with industries that are early in their digital adoption journeys, right? Power companies, manufacturing organizations that don't really procure much software. And a lot of the software vendors in the space have a more, let's say, traditional view of business alignment, because they come from the more commoditized model and not the customer-led growth SaaS mindset that CS flourishes in. So it's funny you asked the question, because actually it's not just the organization, but the customer. We have to spend so much time aligning and saying, yes, this is what a CSM does, and here's what we're here to do alongside our services organization that's going to help you deploy use cases on top of our data platform. So that alignment's been challenging. And then, of course, hiring has been a challenge as well. We've 4x'd our team from, I think we're up to 20-ish now across the world that is involved in customer success in some way or another. And that's the CSM function. Just to be clear, our post-sale function is over 100 plus, but the CSM function, we grew from 5 to 20 in about a year. And I think I have, last count, 123 pages of interview notes, just to give some context. But one of those people that we hired had CS in their job title before they joined our organization, because we're looking for this credibility that shows the customer as opposed to tells the customer the value they bring. So that's why I'm bemused by the question, but I still think there's a real, and maybe I'll get to it. Part of the reason why I've we are officially launched. I've launched the world's first awards program dedicated to customer success, is I'm worried about customer success excellence is the name, and I will have my shameless plug at the end. I've been promised. But the reason I bring it up now is because think that we as a function sometimes cause a bit of a self-inflicted struggle where we talk a lot about what CS is not. The discourse hasn't matured like we want our function to. And I think that's probably mostly a reflection that the majority of people in customer success continue to be new to the space. So a lot of the content is a 101, here's what CS is. And that's a good thing, right? We should all be bullish on the growth of our function. But I'm still looking for this podcast excluded, by the way. I've heard many innovative things here and in other forums as well. But I think the main discourse is one that's still very, I even say entry level. And the reason I founded this awards is to highlight those that don't talk about what they're doing. They just go and execute in an exceptional way. And then we're trying to share what that execution looks like back to the industry. And the reason why I think it's relevant here is that's if you're coming into a company trying to establish customer success, and the notion that they have in their mind is, oh, CS is not support, but then what is it? Because the conversation they've experienced is CS is not support. We're doing ourselves a disservice. So part of the reason why we founded the awards is to have a content out there that's actually about not what we're not, but the innovation that's out there that exists. So we can educate those within organizations to make it easier for a CS leader to step in and have a lane to fill. Maybe it's not the best answer to your question because it's such a diverse challenge in each organization. But I think the organizations that get it are using that as a differentiator for hiring and acquiring talent, right? Because especially in CS leadership, there's so much opportunity for leaders to find not just a CS leadership role, but one in an organization that really values the customer. I just think in the excitement of everyone's upward trajectory in customer success, because the more supply of leadership roles, the more demand for leadership roles, and limited supply means that people are spending less years as an individual contributor in our function than others before jumping into leadership. And in that enthusiasm, I think it's important to pause and really kind of do some due diligence as to how the organization understands customer success before leaping in. And I've heard a lot of challenges from folks who maybe struggle to navigate that leap, which has been hard.
I love that, Alex. And you've talked about so many key things there. And I think that journey for a lot of people in customer success is varied. We see a lot of new people come into it. They're looking for that guidance, that direction. What does the future look like? In the organizations you've worked in, and even the work you've done with the awards, in your mind, what does, if there is such a thing, what does that ideal organization structure look like for customer success? And feel free to either go down the route of it's purely focused on CSMs, or it's something as a CS leader, your role is broader. But I'd love to get your view as to if there is an ideal, what do you think it should look like and why?
So maybe I can briefly touch on both. For startups, I see a real aversion to splitting roles early on. And I think it's ill-advised. And what I mean by that is you have the CSM that's responsible for onboarding and the training and the customer success management, and maybe even the support. In some ways set them up to fail because we're just giving them a bunch of reactive transactional tasks. And then when they have a moment to breathe, they have to think proactively. But they've just spent the last 90 days onboarding this customer and showing the customer executive that they're the onboarding team, not the customer success team. So I think splitting the org chart as quickly as possible, at the very least, a more proactive value-centric layer at the top, which is usually the CSM function, maybe some customer marketing or community that's there to do the one-to-many with support, onboarding, and training. That could be one role because I'm going to set you up. I'm going to make sure you can use the tool and help you when you get stuck. But really splitting reactive and proactive quickly is important. And then to touch on the second part of your question around the CSM function, this is where I think there's going to be a lot of change. And I think I see it already. Cognite's a pretty use case based product. So we sell our data platform, Cognite Data Fusion, but a lot of our customers don't have the data science capability in-house to leverage the contextualized data. So our industry solutions organization will help them understand their business pain points and create dashboards and custom applications on top of our data platform to drive business value. But that requires a huge amount of domain expertise. And more, I see products out there that are even like RPA platforms that are growing very quickly. They require domain expertise because you have to know which processes are ripe for automation. And the customer bought your tool because they don't really know much about robotic process automation. The CSM function I'm starting to see now as SaaS becomes a little bit more use case centric, more generally, splits of CS almost back to the account management model. And I don't purport to say we need to go back to a model where we're picking up the phone when there's a problem, right? We're still in this CSM proactive motion. But what I mean by account management model is more proactive, but commercial acumen. And I think we've now maybe realized in the war for talent, especially given how hot the CS market is for CSMs, it's hard to find that perfect combination of commercial acumen, technical understanding, and domain expertise. So I'm seeing now almost a three-way split where you have these kind of, I'll use my American analogy of quarterbacks who are the CSMs, right? And their job is to quarterback in pooled technical experts, maybe your TAM role, for example, that maybe sit 1 foot in support and 1 foot in customer success. But then also now pooled customer success consultants or pooled domain experts, especially for organizations that have a heavy domain specific focus, Cognite being one of them, but there's plenty of software products that have split their offering or go to market into industry specific functions where it's hard to find. Give my example from before, right? Where one of the 15 people I've hired is a former CSM. It's hard to find transferable CS skills with rich domain expertise, especially for complex software offerings. So I think that's where I see CSM going, where we continue to step away from being the everything department, to coin the phrase that I think Rav, who we all know, coined, but to be very specific in their role with still one owner that quarterbacks everybody in and everybody out. But it's going to require a lot more coordination to make sure it's not a customer experience with 8 different cooks in the kitchen.
I really like what you're saying too about the domain expertise, because we've spoken with a lot of folks on the podcast and otherwise. And I find in certain industries, you have like security, crypto, AI, data. Many times the customer doesn't have the talent or domain expertise in-house. And one of the things you said is you're selling your technology in these areas. And I think a lot of times software companies think, oh, we're selling technology in the solution in this area. The customer thinks they're buying an outcome in this area and they don't know what they don't know. So I think you need to be able to bring in that mix of expertise and software and process. And you're absolutely, I love the football analogy, quarterback piece there, because I think making sure you can bring all those to bear for your customers is essential. And it's a good revenue opportunity for the software companies too, if they can deliver on it.
I think the thing you said about Alex as well, about that commercial acumen, that's critical. We're beginning to see that shift. We talked, I think, the other week, Jason, the experience you get when someone different to your CSM comes in just to handle the commercials is a really disjointed experience. But there's a lot of organizations still doing it because the CS team just don't have that commercial understanding. And I think that still is an area where there's a lot of debate around what's the right method. And it really does depend on the organization. But I think we are beginning to see that trend where customer success is becoming more and more commercial like it should be. It's about value and outcomes for the customer. And then that helps us internally.
I think just quickly on that, because it's such a good point, and frankly, we're still trying to find the right balance at Cognite. And I see a lot of organizations in that space. And I think to be able to participate in that conversation as a CS leader, you have to have the value stuff right first. And it's because CS is so new and organizations, some even large organizations are just starting out their customer success journey. Maybe we get a little bit too ambitious with the amount of things that we can own all at the same time. And I guess it goes back to my previous rare moment of self-awareness, saying that when we come in there like a bull in a china shop saying, this is mine, I'll take this, I'll take that. In some ways we set ourselves up to fail because, and I think if I can make just one more comment about the state of our industry, I think there's a little bit of playbook repetition that doesn't really help, where, oh, we're supposed to own renewal because good CS teams are commercial CS teams. So we need to own the renewal right now. Or the health score method, the health score framework that we're going to use is one that's on the internet that I found somewhere, but I don't actually think about what our customer needs to be healthy and what even health means for our customer. So I think I'm happy now to see organizations as the definition of customer success maybe gets away from the very standard CSM role and we start to specialize. Frankly, there's probably more time for us to really think about, okay, our job is to get our value for our customers. We might be informed by some of these traditional playbooks, but certainly not just going to implement QBRs for the sake of it. And I think that's an important thing for our industry to consider as well.
I love that too, because I think there's so many places where you see common practice is not necessarily the best practice or best for your industry or your organization. It does a big disservice, I think, to a lot of organizations to go down that road without that critical analysis and thought of saying, is this the right thing here in this context?
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that, because who defines best practice, right? It's a best practice because people talk about it, but then we're playing a game of telephone, right? Where I did it at this organization, therefore I say it's a best practice on some podcast, and then somebody else thinks, oh, I should do this too. And then we don't have the kind of, don't step back, think about our individual customer and just be guided by those principles as opposed to trying to take a script and rinse and repeat at every organization that
That's the super key thing. I think the risk with, there's a lot of, now we're seeing some great industry standards in kind of CS training certification, but it's no dissimilar to ITIL, Prince 2, all of these methodologies. They're there as guides. This isn't telling you
Yep.
this is how to do it. And you've got to be remember that's so critical, because if you follow them word for word, it's just not going to work. You need that stepping back. As you said, Alex, that analysis. What do our customers want? What does it mean? What are we trying to do with it?
and if I may, yeah, just to jump off of that, Prince 2 is about project management, right? Sales process methodology, whether it's force management, medic, whatever tool or training you use, that is about one concrete process, getting a customer set up or closing a deal. And then when you combine so that's simplicity, it's a framework. We have to implement it into our own context, but then take customer success where the definition is different per company. Your job ultimately, it doesn't really have a start and finish. It's to tread water or ideally raise the altitude of the customer and help them grow to achieve their goal. But the momentum is completely different.
Yeah.
So no wonder it's such a challenge, because I can't just take a Prince 2 course and then apply it to my 30-day onboarding. I have to think about all of the different lanes that CSMs play in, which is has so much breadth, which is why I think it's such an important thing that we start to specialize the function to really find some depth and effectiveness within our roles.
And I think relates that to what you were saying earlier of the war for talent for CS folks. And there's not a lot of overly experienced people there. And you've got this dearth of common practice and this echo chamber around, we should do this, we should do that. That when you actually get into a lot of organizations, the people who are making the decisions, they don't have enough experience or knowledge to challenge those decisions. So they start with what's making the most noise and just repeats on itself. I am curious though, and I know we're almost out of time here, but with the teams that you've been building and developing, you say one person has CS on their resume. What is it that you're looking for when you're trying to find this is going to be a great person? And then what do you have to do to mold them and develop them into what you really need in your organization?
Such an important question. And I think, firstly, I think what I'm looking for is tenacity. And tenacity is important to me because it means that the candidate will fight for their customer. The candidate will use some sharp elbows once in a while to find the lane that they need to fill in the CSM function. And also tenaciously engage with other departments within the organization that need something from their customer. And of course, there's elements of it's hard to establish proactivity with the customer when they don't respond to your email. Right. So how am I going to show value? Get them to respond to me and then get them on the happy path. So tenacity is important for me. And then I think there's, especially in our industry, domain expertise is critical. So we certainly look for that. And then some commercial experience as well. I kind of mentioned the trinity earlier around technical expertise, domain, and commercial. In terms of transferable skills, we hire for domain on the resume because it's just so important to have that credibility with customers, because digitalization, the span of what you can digitalize is so vast. But in terms of transferable skills, it's tenacity and then really an ability to learn and be challenged as well. I think one of the things that's really interesting for us is we're hiring a lot of, the energy industry, for example, is going through a huge change at the moment, and digital tools and digital transformation is critical for that change. We have a real opportunity as traditional oil and gas companies pivot to diversify their energy and bid for wind farms and create wind farms from scratch. We have a huge opportunity to engage with these customers to build digital first, right? So we don't have to transform your asset. We can actually set it up in a way that allows us to see the live operating status of this offshore wind farm, for example. But that requires us to really kind of get in become a partner and almost put our consultant hat on to make sure that we're designing these things with our customers. So Cognite's maybe a little bit of a unique case, but it's been very interesting to try and evaluate and understand what works and also what doesn't. But I think that ability to be stretched and challenged is probably the most important thing.
I think you're seeing organizations go that direction as well. I like the way you're talking, is that industry expertise. I think customers look for it in you, whether or not you've got it or the individuals in your team, but they are looking for it. And it's something that if you don't have it and you're coming into a business, you need to pick it up quickly, because that proactive consultancy is a key thing.
And I, in some ways, have lived that experience.
Yep.
I've always been domain agnostic in my companies, and HR tech and legal tech, the domains that we focused on, I could understand relatively quickly the levers that companies pull on to drive the outcomes that are common. digital transformation for energy when I'm hiring 20-year process automation engineers on my team is a totally different beast. And I think one of the things that organizations now should really be investing in are onboarding programs, not to train you how to be a CSM, but also onboarding programs about the domain and about the industries that we serve and common business challenges or common outcomes that customers are trying to achieve. And I think there's a real opportunity to really pivot the traditional onboarding when we're going to go back to talking about talent acquisition, but also talent retention, giving everybody the tools, not just to be a CSM, but everything that comes with it. We put you on a commercial training, great. But how am I helping you have credibility in front of your customers so that you can use those commercial skills, so you can get into the room to use those commercial skills is exceptionally important. And go ahead. Sorry, Jason.
No, go.
Sure. I was speaking to a board member of one of the companies I advise, and he said something that really stuck with me. And as I was saying to you earlier, not to break the fourth wall here, but I was saying to you earlier, I just came back from skiing and I caught myself skiing down a slope and thinking about what he said to me. That's how SaaS nerdy I am. I was thinking about this as I was headed down a lovely ski run earlier this weekend, but basically said the first generation of SaaS is to digitalize existing workflows. And then the second generation, and I'm paraphrasing, but the second generation is about replacing the workflows, just replacing them fully with software. And I think when I think about the domains that I've worked in and also organizations now moving to more of a use case based approach with more consulting required, it's interesting that the digitalization of existing workflows probably requires less domain expertise because the customer is bringing that domain expertise to you. They've set up their workflow. They know what's needed. They just need to automate it. And now as we move, if we accept the premise that SaaS is eating the world, we're seeing more of these generation 2 or 3 SaaS companies that are actually challenging the workflows that we've come to know so near and dear. And that requires a lot more knowledge of the overall business model and a lot more knowledge of the domain itself. And I wonder if that's a trend that will continue, connecting then back to what we talked about with the CSM, AM type approach with then the pooled domain experts. And really to the point that you made, Jason, and you both made it, so I can say just Jason, that we require a more nuanced approach to how we make our customers successful, which is super interesting. And obviously it's a great time as always to be in customer success.
It is indeed. It is. It's very exciting. And for me, my company Success Chain, we provide consulting and professional development services and coaching services. And increasingly we're finding organizations coming to us where they've been hiring for domain skills and that's been critical to their model. And now they're trying to layer on CS expertise and a lot more interpersonal and just professional skills and those influencing skills that you're looking for. We help them do that. But it's even the last few months, I'd say the demand for that sort of professional development has been huge and increasing. Well, Alex, this has been a great conversation. Really excited to have you here. Before we go, we always like to end with a bold challenge question. And I guess for you, this is, what does the future of customer success look like in a company? A lot of things are changing here. Go big, go bold. How do you see it?
The future is it doesn't exist anymore. And that will be great, because I think customer success created itself out of a need to focus on why the customer is here in the first place. It's not to say existing departments don't care. It's that they're too busy dealing with their small lens or small column in the customer journey and improving their internal process. So we had to take the 20% most customer-centric bits, as I said earlier, and combine it in a role that kind of spanned the horizontal to make sure that the customer is successful and renews their contract. My hope is that over the next 5 years becomes either embedded in products and not something that a person needs to do. Embedded in digital touch, we always imply is long tail, but digital touch, I think, is here to stay. And look at how marketing has changed, where we expect all customers to engage digitally now. The same thing will happen to customer success. And then also the internal voice of the customer. I think the future chief product officers, chief revenue officers, and CEOs of the world will come from the customer success domain. And when that happens, especially as B2B companies, as we say, B2B is becoming B2C, where the customer expectation is now changing and we're raising the stakes of what's expected. So I think with all of those things changing, you'll see former CCOs and VPs of CS stepping into other adjacent roles that then almost eliminate the need to have somebody who has their seat at the table advocating for the customer because the organization does, right? That's one future. If we do our job and we stop talking about what CS isn't, but maybe talk a bit more about what CS is and can be. So that's awesome. Exciting. We'll see. Have me back in 5 years and we'll talk about it.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining. Love your insights. Love your story. I think it's going to inspire a lot of people here. Before we go, we always like to invite our guests to give a shameless plug. So please plug away.
Shameless. Absolutely. It will be very shameless because we, on June 15th of this year, have a very exciting event, the first awards ceremony for customer success excellence. So as I said earlier, customer success excellence, I had the idea for about 2 or 3 years now, but I think we all want to meet in person. So I've held it back until we could do that. And what it is essentially is that meritocratic process to find the very best in our profession, whether they're a guest on a podcast or just putting their head down and executing for their company. There are 5 award categories. You can find out all the information on our website, customersuccessexcellence.com. And we will be running 2 awards programs, one for EMEA and one for the Americas. EMEA, the awards ceremony is the 15th of June, 2022. And the applications for nominations will open in the middle of April. And then we're planning to bring it to the Americas toward the end of 2022 or early 2023. But it's 75% is it's this meritocratic approach to helping find the very best in customer success. And 25% is so we can all dress up nice and have our own version of the Academy Awards. We certainly deserve it as a community. So I'm really looking forward to making that happen.
That's an exciting goal. I know a lot of people will be very inspired by it. So thank you for moving that forward. It's great for the industry. Everyone, on behalf of the Jasons, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you will come back for another episode. We have a few more great guests lined up. We're very excited to be here. So thanks so much, Al.
Thanks, Alex. Really cool conversation. I really appreciate it. I got my audio working again there, but really cool. And I am super excited about the Excellence Awards. I think it's the right time in the industry. And I know a lot of people are really looking forward to it. So great work there. And a massive thank you for joining us today.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.